Jesus is widely known as a sinless prophet, born of a virgin, who performed miracles and taught with great wisdom. He was betrayed, arrested, and brought before the political and religious authorities here in Jerusalem. Ultimately, he was convicted of blasphemy and sentenced to death. For centuries, we have believed that Jesus died on the cross at Calvary. However, recent events have emerged that may challenge everything we thought we knew. A Bible insider, Bishop Ignatius, was said to have lived during the time of Jesus' disciples. At the end of the 1st century and into the beginning of the 2nd, Ignatius of Antioch, a renowned figure in Christian history, served as a bishop and a martyr. His writings were cherished by the Church. Astonishingly, Ignatius claimed that what we all believed was wrong. He vehemently opposed the idea that Jesus was crucified or even placed on the cross. Surprisingly, Ignatius is not alone in these shocking claims. Some Christian groups and sects have echoed the same belief. But what do they mean by this? If Jesus didn't die on the cross, how did he die? And who was the man crucified on the cross? Prepare to have your perspective transformed. Before we delve into the startling revelations in Ignatius's letters, let's uncover who this man was and why he wrote these letters. In the early days of Christianity, a man named Ignatius was in Antioch. Antioch, now in modern Turkey, is known for its diverse population and as an early center of Christian activity. Today, Syrian Antioch is known as Antakya, with a population of about 250,000. The city is now in the country of Turkey, about 14 miles inland from the Mediterranean coast and 12 miles west of the Syrian border. Ignatius was born between the late 30s and early 50s AD, when the Christian church began spreading its roots. Ignatius grew up in a world where the new Christian faith emerged amidst a predominantly pagan society. Although the details of his early life need to be well documented, Ignatius is believed to be a disciple of the Apostle John. This connection to John, one of Jesus' closest followers, placed Ignatius in a unique position within the early Christian community. As Ignatius matured, he became known for his deep faith and dedication to the teachings of Jesus. His commitment did not go unnoticed, and he was eventually chosen to be the Bishop of Antioch. Being a bishop meant that Ignatius was responsible for overseeing the spiritual well-being of the Christians in Antioch and guiding them in their faith. However, Ignatius's role as a bishop was both an honor and a significant challenge because Christians faced severe persecution from the Roman Empire during this time. They were often arrested, tortured, and killed for their beliefs. But despite these dangers, Ignatius continued to lead his congregation with courage and unwavering faith. That's not all. Ignatius is also best known for the letters he wrote during the final journey of his life. But the Roman Empire didn't turn a blind eye to Ignatius. So, around 107 AD, Ignatius was arrested by Roman authorities for his Christian faith. Ignatius of Antioch, he is clearly the target of Trajan's anger because he is arrested, brought to Rome to be executed by being fed to lions, probably in the Colosseum. He was sentenced to be taken to Rome where he would face execution. But instead of seeing this as a defeat, Ignatius viewed his impending death as an opportunity to witness his faith to the fullest. But during this time, he started what would later be the center of discussions amongst Christians worldwide. As he was transported to Rome, Ignatius wrote letters to various Christian communities, including those in Ephesus, Magnesia, Tralles, Rome, Philadelphia, and Smyrna. While Ignatius is on his way to Rome, he's able to write 7 letters. And it's because of these letters that we know who he is. These letters provide invaluable insight into the early Christian church. Ignatius's journey to Rome was long and not an easy one. As he traveled, he was guarded by Roman soldiers. He wrote letters filled with encouragement, advice, and theological reflections, which were later treasured by the Christian communities. One of his most famous letters addressed the Christians in Rome. Ignatius made a heartfelt plea not to intervene in his impending martyrdom in this letter. He expressed his desire to die for his faith, viewing his martyrdom as a way to truly follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. So, upon arriving in Rome, Ignatius was taken to the Colosseum. In this large arena, public spectacles, including executions, were held. In the Colosseum, Ignatius faced his final trial. He was thrown to wild animals, but he met his death with bravery and conviction, becoming a martyr for his faith. Ignatius is convinced that he's going to die violent, and this is okay with him because Ignatius wants to follow the model of Christ. Ignatius's death had a serious impact on the early Christian church. His willingness to die rather than renounce his faith inspired many other Christians. His letters continued to be read and circulated among the Christian communities, providing guidance and encouragement. Interestingly, he is considered one of the Apostolic Fathers, a group of early Christian leaders who were directly connected to the apostles of Jesus. I bet you didn't know that Ignatius is honored with a feast day in many Christian traditions, especially in the Catholic, Orthodox, and Anglican churches. This special day is set aside to remember and celebrate his life and contributions to the Christian faith. His feast day is usually observed on October 17th. His writings have been said to be crucial in shaping early Christian theology and practice. His teachings on church leadership, the importance of the Eucharist, and the need to stand firm against heresy were foundational for the development of the Christian church. One of his 7 letters, which was said to be the letter to the Magnesians, talks about the transitioning of early Christians from Jewish customs to Christian practices. In this letter, Ignatius asserted that some believed that Jesus did not die on the cross. However, it is quite shocking to find out that he also did not state how Jesus really died before he was resurrected. So what was Ignatius trying to say? Did Ignatius think Jesus didn't actually die on the cross? Let's find out. His letters and other beliefs. Ignatius' letters are very important because they give us a glimpse into what early Christians believed and how they lived. However, these letters reveal that Ignatius had unique views about Jesus and the crucifixion. According to the traditional story, Jesus was arrested by the Roman authorities because some Jewish leaders accused him of claiming to be the king of the Jews, which was seen as a threat to Roman rule. Jesus was tried, beaten, and forced to carry his cross to Calvary. There, he was nailed to the cross and left to die a slow and painful death. After he died, his body was placed in a tomb, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. This resurrection story is a cornerstone of the Christian faith, signifying the victory over sin and death. But here's where it gets interesting and a bit tricky. Ignatius was a firm believer in Jesus Christ. Still, he had some thoughts that differed slightly from the popularly accepted. In his letters, Ignatius talked about Jesus in a way that made some people wonder if he believed in the same crucifixion story. He emphasized the importance of Jesus' teachings and resurrection, but didn't focus as much on the crucifixion. It's important to know that Ignatius didn't directly say that Jesus wasn't crucified. However, his letters raise some interesting points that make people wonder what he thought. Ignatius focused more on the spiritual aspects of Jesus' life and resurrection than the physical suffering on the cross. Some scholars think that Ignatius might have been influenced by different ideas that were circulating at the time. There were groups of early Christians who had different interpretations of Jesus' life and death. For example, some believed that Jesus didn't die on the cross, but someone else took his place. This idea might sound strange to us today, but it was part of a broader set of beliefs known as Gnosticism. What is this about? Or should we say, who were the Gnostics? They were a group of early Christians with different beliefs about Jesus and salvation. They had some contradictory beliefs that would make one wonder if they were Christians. They believed that secret spiritual knowledge known as gnosis was the key to salvation. Some Gnostics thought that Jesus, being a divine being, couldn't really suffer and die like a human. What's more, one Gnostic group, the Basilidians, was named after their leader, Basilides. The Basilidians believed that Jesus didn't really suffer and die on the cross. Instead, they thought that someone else took his place. According to their belief, Simon of Cyrene, the man who helped Jesus carry the cross, was the one who was actually crucified. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They believed that Jesus was too divine to suffer such a terrible death, so he escaped unharmed and watched the crucifixion from a distance. Another Gnostic group was the Carpocratians. They had similar beliefs to the Basilidians. The Carpocratians also thought that Jesus didn't die on the cross. They believed that Jesus had special powers and knowledge and that he used these powers to avoid suffering. Like the Basilidians, they believed someone else was crucified in his place. But when you thought you'd seen it all, there were also the Ebionites. Now the Ebionites were a Jewish Christian sect, which means they were Jews who followed Jesus but also kept many Jewish traditions. They had a different view of Jesus compared to the Gnostics. The Ebionites believed that Jesus was a great prophet and a human being, not divine. Jesus for the Ebionites was the Jewish Messiah sent from the Jewish God to the Jewish people in fulfillment of the Jewish scriptures. However, the Ebionites believed something similar to the Gnostics. When it came to the crucifixion, they thought that Jesus didn't die on the cross. Instead, they believed that Simon of Cyrene was crucified in Jesus' place. According to the Ebionites, Jesus was taken to heaven without suffering death. However, although Ignatius' letters don't directly say that he believed in these Gnostic ideas, his emphasis on the resurrection and his somewhat vague references to the crucifixion have led some scholars to speculate about his true beliefs. Well, you might be wondering why these groups had such different beliefs. However, this contradictory belief is not only in the Christian religion. Other religions like Islam also share the same view about Jesus not being crucified. If this is true, what does the Quran say about Jesus and his crucifixion? Because the Quran told me Jesus did not die on the cross. The Quran says in chapter 4, verse 157, وَمَا قَتَلُّهُ وَمَا صَلَبُهُ. We killed him not, nor did they crucify him, but so it was made to appear to them. The Quran is the holy book of Islam, and it includes many teachings about Jesus, known in Arabic as Isa. In Islam, Jesus is considered one of the greatest prophets, but not the Son of God. Muslims believe that Jesus performed miracles, was born to the Virgin Mary, called Maryam in Arabic, and brought a message from God to the people. However, the Quran presents a different story about what happened to Jesus at the end of his life. Interestingly, in the Quran there is a specific verse about Jesus' crucifixion. It is found in Surah 4, 157-158, which says, "And for their saying, indeed, we have killed the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of Allah. And they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but another was made to resemble him to them. And indeed those who differ over it are in doubt about it. They have no knowledge of it except the following of assumption. And they did not kill him for certain. Rather, Allah raised him to himself, and ever is Allah exalted in might and wise." This verse clearly states that Jesus was not killed or crucified. Instead, it says that it only appeared to people that Jesus was crucified. Someone else was made to look like Jesus, and that person was crucified in his place. Meanwhile, God took Jesus up to heaven. The Quran's account introduces the idea of substitution, where another person was made to look like Jesus and was crucified instead. This unique idea has sparked many discussions and interpretations over the centuries. But why do you think the Quran rejects this idea of crucifixion? This is because in Islam, God highly respects and protects prophets. God would allow one of his greatest prophets to suffer such a humiliating and painful death doesn't align with Islamic beliefs. Instead, the Quran teaches that God saved Jesus from this fate. Also, the Quran is to clarify what Muslims believe to be the true accounts of past prophets and their missions. So, by stating that Jesus was not crucified, the Quran is correcting what it sees as a misunderstanding or fault in the Christian narrative. More importantly, Islam strongly believes in the oneness of God and rejects any notion that a prophet could be divine. By denying the crucifixion, and by extension the resurrection, the Quran separates Jesus from any divine attributes, maintaining the monotheism central to Islam. You might not know, but according to the Quran, after the crucifixion was made to appear as if it happened, Jesus was taken up to heaven by God. This event to them is known as the ascension. Muslims believe that Jesus is still alive in heaven and will return to earth before the Day of Judgment. According to Islamic teachings, This belief is significant because it shows that it still has an important role in the future. In the future, they describe that Jesus will return before the end of time. This event is known as the Second Coming. When Jesus returns, he will restore justice, defeat the false Messiah, the Dajjal, and bring peace to the world. Muslims believe that Jesus' return will be a sign of the end times and the day of judgment. Talking about judgment, Bishop Ignatius, our character-focused video, known for addressing the wrongs, was moved with compassion in one of his letters as he addressed the practices of early Christians during his time, inciting that there could be an impending judgment on them if they don't change their ways. What were they doing, and what did he say to them? Early practices and Ignatius's view on Judaism. Early Christians initially were predominantly Jewish converts who continued to observe Jewish traditions, including the Sabbath Saturday as a day of rest and worship. They saw Jesus as fulfilling Jewish prophecy and continued attending synagogues alongside their Christian gatherings. However, over time, more non-Jews, popularly called Gentiles, embraced Christianity. The need for a distinct Christian identity became needed. One significant practice common among early Christians was celebrating the Lord's Day, which gradually replaced the Jewish Sabbath. The Lord's Day, observed on Sunday, became the primary day for Christian worship and fellowship. This shift in the day of worship symbolized the belief among Christians that Jesus rose from the dead on a Sunday, signifying a new era of grace and salvation. Now, Ignatius of Antioch in his letters addressed the tension between maintaining Jewish customs and embracing new Christian practices. Ignatius is credited with being among the first to use the term Christianity to describe the faith of followers of Jesus Christ. The term marked a significant departure from the Jewish identity of early Christians, emphasizing a distinct religious community centered on Jesus as the Messiah. Ignatius advocated for separation from Jewish traditions of Gentile Christians, emphasizing a distinct Christian identity centered on faith in Jesus Christ. He wanted to criticize Christians who continued to adhere to Jewish practices such as Sabbath observance and dietary laws. He argued that these customs were no longer necessary or relevant in the new covenant established through Jesus Christ. Instead, he urged Christians to focus on the teachings of Jesus and the apostles, emphasizing faith in Christ's resurrection and the grace extended to believers. The early church struggled to establish a unique Christian identity while honoring its Jewish roots. The Council of Jerusalem around 50 AD, as recorded in the New Testament, addressed some of these issues, particularly concerning Gentile circumcision and dietary laws. However, Ignatius's stance helped establish a more universal and inclusive Christian identity beyond cultural and ethnic boundaries. But do you know that Ignatius's rejection of Jewish customs contrasts with Jesus's own respect for Jewish law during his ministry? Interestingly, Jesus, a Jew himself, upheld the teachings of the Torah, which is the Jewish law, and emphasized fulfilling rather than abolishing them. He taught his followers to obey the commandments and to respect the authority of Jewish leaders, even while critiquing their hypocrisy. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus offers teachings about Jewish law crucial in shaping early Christian beliefs and practices. Jesus frequently interacted with Jewish religious leaders, known as Pharisees and scribes, during his ministry. They were experts in Jewish law and often questioned Jesus about his teachings and practices. Jesus, however, criticized the Pharisees not for their adherence to the law itself, but for their hypocrisy. He denounced them for placing heavy burdens on others without helping them and being more concerned with outward appearances than true righteousness. Contrary to rejecting Jewish law, Jesus affirmed its importance. He emphasized that he did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. Jesus respected the teachings of the Torah and encouraged his followers to observe them. Jesus also taught that the essence of the law was to uphold justice, show mercy, and have faithfulness. He emphasized that love for God and others should motivate obedience to God's commandments. In the Sermon on the Mount, as seen in Matthew 5-7, Jesus delivered key teachings about the law. He explained that true righteousness surpassed the external observance of commandments. Instead, it involved purity of heart, forgiveness, and reconciliation with others. He also provided practical examples to illustrate his teachings on the law. For instance, he taught about loving one's enemies, turning the other cheek to be slapped, and going the extra mile for one another. These teachings challenge conventional interpretations of the law and encourage compassion and humility. It is said that throughout his ministry, Jesus used parables and direct teachings to convey the principles of the kingdom of God. He said that no part of the law would pass away until everything was fulfilled. Regarding Sabbath observance, Jesus demonstrated compassion by healing the sick and performing acts of mercy, even on the Sabbath. He emphasized that the Sabbath was made for humanity's benefit, not as a burden. Today, it is believed that the tension between Jesus' teachings on Jewish law and Ignatius's rejection of Jewish customs shaped early Christian identity. People say it prompted discussions in the early church about the relationship between the Old Testament scriptures and the New Covenant established through Jesus Christ. There are, however, debates and concerns among the early leaders of the church, especially involving the head of the church at that time, on whether to continue the Jewish practices or abolish them after Jesus' resurrection. There are speculations that the head of the church moved to continue upholding the law. Still, Paul the Apostle moved to abolish it. But could this be true? Who was the head of the church, and what were the concerns? Catholics have insisted that the head of the church at that time was Peter, but the Bible clearly states in the book of Acts that James was the head of the church. James, also known as James the Just, was a key figure in the early Christian movement. He was Jesus' biological brother and became the church leader in Jerusalem after Jesus' death and resurrection. James's close familial relationship with Jesus gave him authority and influence among early Christians. James's leadership in the Jerusalem church was significant. He was respected by Jewish Christians who maintained Jewish customs alongside their faith in Jesus, and Gentile Christians, non-Jewish converts to Christianity. James provided stability and guidance during the formative years of the Christian community. One distinguishing aspect of James's leadership was his strict adherence to Jewish customs and traditions. He continued to observe Jewish laws and rituals, including dietary laws and Sabbath observance. This adherence reflected the continuity of early Christianity with its Jewish roots and traditions. However, unlike James, Paul had a more flexible approach to Jewish law. Initially a Pharisee and persecutor of Christians, Paul underwent a dramatic conversion experience on his way to Damascus. He became a prominent apostle to the Gentiles. He taught faith in Jesus Christ over adherence to Jewish customs, arguing that faith, not works of the law, justified believers before God. What's more, an incident in the New Testament book of Acts illustrates the tension between James' adherence to Jewish customs and Paul's approach. Acts recounts how Paul returned to Jerusalem and met with James and other leaders of the Jerusalem church. However, concerns arose among Jewish Christians that Paul was teaching Gentile converts to disregard Jewish customs, such as circumcision and dietary laws. So, to address these concerns and demonstrate his respect for Jewish customs, James and the elders of the Jerusalem church suggested that Paul participate in a purification ritual. This ritual involved Paul joining other men in a ceremonial purification process at the temple in Jerusalem. By doing so, Paul intended to show that he still respected Jewish traditions and laws despite his emphasis on faith in Jesus Christ. The debate between James and Paul seriously influenced the development of early Christian communities. So, while some Jewish Christians continued to observe Jewish customs alongside their faith in Jesus, Gentile Christians increasingly outnumbered Jewish converts and did not adhere to Jewish laws. This diversity of practice and belief made up the early church's understanding of its identity and mission. We've come to the end of this video. In the comments section, let us know what you think about Ignatius's view of the crucifixion. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.